All right, hello, my name is Mike Suzak, and I am the creator of this Playdate game called CodeWordPlay. I've been meaning to make a video like this for a while, trying to help other developers learn Pulp and Pulpscript, the extremely easy to use browser based game development solution for Playdate games. I really love using it. I'm using it for multiple projects at this point, and I'm very excited about it. And I also like to think that I've found some ways to really expand the uses of Pulp. So I wanted to just kind of do a little bit of a breakdown on how I made CodeWordPlay in hopes that maybe it'll help some others out there making a similar game, whether it's a puzzle game or beyond that, depending on anything that you can dream up using some of the techniques that I cover here. I apologize if I skip around. I don't typically do videos like this, but let's give it a go. So first things first, let's just kind of go over CodeWordPlay itself. It is a word puzzle game that I made. It's just a four-letter word game as it's described here, with a little bit of a twist in terms of story that emerges as the game goes on. We'll just kind of go through some of the screens here. I have some options in here. I've got three different game modes. The third one I added most recently, that's a super chill mode where there's, I think it's relaxed is the new one, where there's no timer. The other game modes have a timer to it. We're going to do chill so you can kind of see both. Then there's some different things having to do with the little clues that are between the letters in each word. I'll go over that as well. So we'll just kind of dive in and we'll do one of these codes here. So we're on code number 2 here because I was just testing it earlier. So you'll see that in here, there's a 4-letter word as the code, and there's these little clues, greater than, less than symbols, and these numbers indicate these spaces between each of the letters in the clues. So obviously, if this letter is 18 above this, there's a good chance this is an A. So we're going to just kind of start with this and see what works. In fact, I actually already know that it's not, so I'm just going to scroll all the way up. I believe it's such is the word here. So C, you know that this is 5 less, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this should be an S. We're just going to solve it fast just to show you what happens. So you see the timer on the left indicates that we should get 3 coins on this. We got a bonus 1 for solving it without getting any wrong, is indicated in the upper right. So pretty simple. I like to think that it's a pretty like smooth sailing, quick pick up and play kind of game. If you're into word games, you can definitely check it out, and hit me up if you do decide to check it out. But that's not the point of this video. I'm not here to sell the game. I'm here to tell you how it was made. So we're going to go into Pulp. This is what it looks like when you log in and you go into your game project. You're presented with this cool window that's got the different rooms. You can build everything tile-based over here. If we scroll down here, you'll see all these different tiles and sorts of nonsense, a little spoilery, I guess, that are divided between sprites and world tiles. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in this game that gets kind of weird. But this is essentially how you build an overall, world in your game. Just from a visual standpoint, I love the fact that it has a UI that you're able to, build stuff out instead of doing everything in code. I just don't think that way. And so I don't know if I'll ever separate myself from Pulp in that way. But it's pretty easy to use. Now, the real key thing to understand is that there's a function in Pulp that's called Pulpscript. It is the scripting language that is the back end of creating Playdate games in Pulp. So Pulpscript is really simple. It's very easy to learn. If you don't have any programming or coding experience at all, that's totally fine. I really encourage, if you're just looking to expand your horizons in that way and you like thinking logically or mathematically, it's really fun to do. And I think this is exactly the kind of thing that, someday I'm going to encourage my kids to dip into if they want to get into STEM activities. So big fan of Pulpscript. Pulpscript, your code, lives in a lot of different places, but the 3 main places is these rooms. So we're going to click the script button over here, and we'll go to our sources up here and go to, there's the rooms, your game, and your player. So game code, really the game when it loads, you can put some specific code in here. Similar to that, the player is always on screen. So think of Pulp as primarily based around making adventure games, these tile-based adventure games. So the concept is that you always have a player on screen. In the case of CodeWordPlay, the player is essentially just the little cursor that you saw here, right? So I mean, like this little guy here, that's a player actually, that's just going between these different tiles. And so then when we, you know, go left to right here, cycling through here, just the little arrow is actually the player in this instance. And so we're just gonna, you know, fail out of this. Yep, we lose a coin, whatever. So your player actually houses a lot of your pulp script. And it's important to know the distinction between where these things should live. And then similar to that, you can have some pulp script that is tucked away in your rooms. So for example, this select screen I have on here, I have specific code that is housed in here. And this is really important for when you want to expand in doing some level creation stuff. I do some stuff in here that is specifically housed in the select screen that then that code can get passed through. So one of the things to know about Pulpscript is that all of your variables are globally scoped. What that means is that if you have an individual tile or sprite or enemy, let's say, you know, these tiles, for example, if they have a variable, let's just pretend that this trophy here is an enemy, right? Doesn't look like much of an enemy. Let's just pretend for a second. If you have script that is assigned to that for that enemy's health, you can't just use the word health because that word, that specific variable, is going to be shared across any other sprite that tries to access that. So if you have two enemies on screen, for example, and you want two different types of health, well, then you have to have variables that are specific to those enemies. And then you need to be able to find a way to track all of those. So if you hit one of them, only one of their health should go down by one. So that's why globally scoped means that any variable you made can be accessed by anything at any time as you prefer. So that's kind of an important distinction to note because not all programming or coding languages are like that. The other thing is that there are no arrays that are inherent to Pulp, meaning that you can't have a variable that then houses multiple pieces of data. It's one variable, one piece of information, and so on. Now there's ways to work around these things, and one of those things is doing what's called custom events. So first off, if we just take a look at our language here, we're going to go and look at the player, right? So you see at the top here, it's on, enter, do. So this is the structure for how Pulpscript works. Enter is an event that's called. And so when you enter the room, this is what this player should do. So what I do is if the room you're in is the title screen, then I want you to do this code. If you're in the start screen, which is where the start room is, when you click code, you go from the select room to the start room. So now we're in the start room. I want you to do this code. So what we'll do is we'll check to see if we have a certain mode. So if you're in regular mode, we should have some certain blips up here in the upper right. If you are in the relaxed mode, well, then I need some different stuff to appear then, for example. So relaxed mode is coins instead of the wrong answer or wrong guess blips up here in the upper right. So I want to change those to coins because then in that mode, if you get a wrong guess, then you lose a coin off the bat. And then similarly, we have some different things like different items that I have you can unlock, and I need to see if you have those items equipped. So then different things can take effect in that room. So it's really important to understand that everything you create has to be living inside one of these events. You can really easily go between each of these, right? So in the player one, there's a couple of events that are really important to understand because only the player can house those certain events. So first thing, before we get too far, one thing I highly, highly recommend is that you have this Pulpscript, document page offered by Panic. Have that just open at all times. I reference this constantly. I use this page all the time. And one of the things that I do is just to have a good reminder for what some of these different default events are. So these are all ones that are automatically part of Pulp. You can't change how these operate. So for example, called once on the game, each room and each tile when all assets are first loaded. So when you first load the game, the on load do, you would have whatever code you put in there start. when you enter a room. So this is different, you know, load and enter are different from each other because each time you enter a certain room, you would then call that. Whenever the player enters a room, you would call whatever code you put inside that event. And so you do things like confirm and cancel. This is every time you press the A button or the B button, every time you dock or undock the crank, every time you use the crank. And then there's some important ones to understand. It's like the draw event. So I was about to show you that. When you are in the player script we'll go to draw right now. Draws happen before called on the player every frame before drawing. So every frame of your game, something is getting drawn to the screen, meaning that a sprite is being drawn to the screen every frame, which for reference, the Playdate runs at 20 frames per second. So, right, you see that up here in the loop event. So that means that everything that you do here in the draw event is happening every single frame. So part of what's really important to understand with Pulpscript is that you don't want to be doing a bunch of heavy calculations in your draw event, because then those heavy calculations are going to happen every single frame, and it's just going to bog your game down and just slow it down to a crawl. So instead, you would want variables that you update elsewhere, for example, enemy health or something like that. You want those variables, when you're making changes to them, to be updated outside of this draw event. And then if you need to call anything in here, you can do that on a frame-to-frame basis. And you see that, for example, there's things like labels. So like this is to draw text to the screen, and you've got curly braces as a way to pull in things like variables. So this mode label is a variable that I change elsewhere. So that way when it says mode, then so the options screen I showed you before when I was changing what mode we were on, it said mode, and then it's relaxed or chill or whatever. And that's a way for me to change that variable and then have that update when I'm hitting the A button. It changes the variable within that screen. So, you know, these are things to understand. Curly braces are a way to call variables in, and so on. So as you're coding, we timed out. I forgot I was on that mode. As you're coding, it's just important to understand where your code is supposed to live. And that's where, again, I go back to the main sources: your player, your game, and then your rooms. So I mentioned earlier some of the limitations that are inherent to Pulp, and some of the issues that people have when they're creating games in Pulp is the globally scoped variables and the lack of arrays, and how to just sort of manage your data, in a sense, manage your variables. So using CodeWordPlay as an example, there are over 400 levels in this game, right? So obviously that means it's 400 words, and so that is a lot of stuff to kind of keep track of. So what I did is I will show you then the select screen. The select screen here, you have some code for when you enter the room. And I've got some stuff for achievements. You know, if it's going to look to see when you enter, hey, did you unlock this? Oh, you did? Okay, great. Because then I can show the little achievement pop-up window and then kind of do what we need to do with giving you some extra coins and stuff for unlocking an achievement, unlocking some of the equipment in the game. There's just some stuff like that to keep note of. However, I also have on level 1, on level 2, these are called custom events. These are not inherent to what Panic created. I created this event on my own. So you can make any event that goes on, whatever you want to call it, do, and then put some code in there. So that way what you can do is you would do something like, when you want to call that event, you would say tell event.player2, and then you would say call level 1 end. And it's really, really simple. You'll get used to this naming convention. Now, you wouldn't have the player or whatever, I guess this is going to give me an error because this is not, the player doesn't own that variable like we were talking about. It's actually the select screen. So I'd say call event.room, right, to tell event.room to call level 1, which is this variable here. So what's happening is that when and we'll go back to the player here, we're going to go to event confirm because that's the A button. So obviously if you're on the select screen, we'll go down else if event room equals select, then if you are on, if event y, so this is the y coordinate of the player is 5, so that would be if you're on the select screen. Oh man, I'm getting myself all messed up here. We'll go to the room, we'll go rooms, we'll go select, right? So if you're like, this is like generally where you are. If you hover over, it'll give you the coordinates of each of these tiles. So this is where the player's got to be. Your cursor's got to be here, and that's where we saw the enter code thing, right? So we'll go back to this next code right here, and you've got to be right here. So that means if your cursor is here on 5, then if you hit the A button here, it's going to do a bunch of stuff inside here. So one of the things it'll do is it will do looking for which level you're on. So there's some triggers here. So for example, and this is a little spoiler for me, you've got to get to level 35 because this is the chapter 1 trigger. And there's like 13 chapters, I forget, like 15 chapters, I don't know, in this game where some of the story events start popping up. So you actually have to play quite a ways before that happens. So in order to do that, I've got to have some flags in here. Hey, let's make sure that you're not on that level. But then, assuming you're not on these specific levels where things start to happen, what would happen is you store some variables that you need, and you tell the event.room call level and then level max, which level max in this case is whatever level you are currently on. So if you're on level 1, it would call the event, tell the room to call the event level 1. So we're going to go back then to the select room, and level 1 gives me the code. It loads in this level data and passes it to the start room when we move to that room. So then you'll see that when we go, we'll check our sources. We're going to go to start. On enter, you're going to restore. So you use store and restore to pass some data around. You don't necessarily, I might be wrong in doing this. You may not have to, but I like to do it as sort of a double check, right? Let's make sure that we're passing the data we need. So in this case, we're restoring target 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's each of the 4 letters in the word. And I'm restoring these numbers. And I'll show you how that works in a little bit here. So when we go to level 1, the code is what? W-H-A-T. And each of those has a specific number they appear in the alphabet. So W in this case is 22nd in the alphabet. A is 0 place. I use zeros, so it goes 0 to 25 instead of 1 to 26. Just easier for me to keep track of for the way that I coded this. So just bear with me. Technically, W is the 23rd letter in the alphabet, but we'll do 22. So 22, 7, 0, 19. The reason I do this is this then allows me to calculate all of these numbers in between, because then in this code, so we're on code 3, we'll go down to 3. 3 is 0, 17, 4, 0. Well, 0, 17, right? So you know then that this is A, and then we'll go and we'll just cheat. A-R-E-A, area. So R is 17 spots above A. E is 13 spots below R. And A is 4 spots below E. There we go. Sweet. Cheating always is satisfying. And that's what happens when you load in that data. It gets passed over to the start screen when you're playing. So that way on the start screen, you know when you're going to take a guess at what the letter is or what the code is. You'll know based on these calculations if you are in the correct spots. That's the gist of that, being able to use these custom events to pass levels across the entire, across your game. For a simple word game, this is what I found to be kind of the effective way to do it. Now, I'm going to take you over to somewhere you might not expect, and that is Google Sheets, because I built all of the words in this game in Google Sheets. I created a word list of over 400 words, like I said before. And then what I did is I created some formulas in Sheets to take this word, break it up into all of the correct spots. And that uses, you'll see over here, it's also doing some work for me over here in the black columns. But then I am getting code here. Then I'm breaking it up even further by doing some other stuff with getting rid of weird spaces and stuff like that. And then I'm getting that even further down here so I can just simply copy this when I'm ready to edit it. And then I would paste and boom, there is the code that I need. Here, we're actually going to put it right next to level 1 just to show you. We'll hit paste and look at that. That's the same. It worked. Awesome. Obviously, it's going to give me an error because there's a duplicate event here. But point is, simple way to create a word game using Google Sheets, using a bunch of custom formulas and stuff. Then all I needed to do was paste it all into the select room. And then that allowed me to assign each of these variables. And notice that they're the same variables, target 1. They're the same for each of these levels because all I'm doing is I'm passing a new value to those variables back into the start room. So, throwing a lot at you. For anyone who's brand new, you might feel a little overwhelmed. But it's important to think about how you're passing your data, how these variables are all globally scoped, and how you can manipulate that data accordingly to create a game with some dynamic updating that maybe Pulp and Pulpscript wasn't necessarily expecting. It's my guess. Right, so I think this covers a lot of what you should look for with coding in Pulpscript and in Pulp. One of the things I also should mention, we'll go over to the start screen here. One of the things I should mention too is that we'll do this. This will visually help. This button here shows you what tiles are unpassable. So think of this little brick as being like the solid versus pass through. You can pass through with the player because again, this is sort of based on making like an adventure game, a tile-based adventure game. So you'll see that, remember, I put my cursor, the player cursor here between these 4 letters. And when you are scrolling through, if you hit the right button, you're bumping into this little wall here. And we're gonna go right move. We're gonna open up the script here and then on interact. So when you interact with that tile, you're telling the player to call this right event. And then if you go down to player and we go down to events and we hit right, then okay, what's happening when you do right? Okay, we're gonna store these variables temporarily. So your X position for the player is stored here. And then you would, when you hit right, it's moving you a little bit. If the player is, greater than or equal to the 20th tile, then you would move all the way to the left, and et cetera, et cetera. So point being is that if you go back to this, there's this interact event that you can call. And I do the same thing with, we'll go back and look at the room. I do the same thing with pushing up or down in order to change these tiles, in order to change the letters that appear here. So if we go to 1, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll do 1 over here. Open up the script and you'll see that when you interact with it, it'll play a little sound. It'll increase what the first letter is out of the 26 letters in the alphabet. So if you increment this up to 26 or beyond it, then it'll flip you all the way back to 0. So that way, when you're cycling through, when you start with A and you go all the way up to Z, it'll blah, 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 cycle you all the way through. So then you're telling the room to call item letter 1. So it would be, remember these curly braces, you can call an event that then attaches a variable to it. And that's such an important thing because then that allows you to call these custom events dynamically. So then in this case, if you go to the event room, which in this case is the start room, right? Look at this, see item 0 all the way up through 26. So we'll go to item 0, right? Item 0, current letter A. And so you're calling all of these. So you call that event and then you tell 5, 7. So we're going to go back here. Let's highlight this. This is position 5, 7 right here. So the X position 5, the Y position 7. And let's go back here. So you're telling that tile to swap to current letter, which current letter is updated over here in this room event. So when you're at 0, it'll say, okay, let's change current letter to A. Now tell that letter to change here. And so the same thing happens over here. Let's say number 4, except instead it's tell 27. So 27, 20, 7 right here. So when you bump this up, it increments that. It calls the room event, changes current letter variable, and then it tells this to swap to that. So then of course A, if you just go ahead, let's just pick this tile up. That means, you guessed it, A is the actual name of this tile. So you're telling it to swap to that specific name. If I were to change that, let's say we went and we changed script over here. I could really mess with this if I wanted to, but if we went to the room script here, let's pop over there. Oh, I hit the wrong room. Start. Here we go. If we changed item 0 and changed current letter, let's say we changed it from A to like trophy or whatever, right? Let's just pick on this trophy one. Trophy 2. If we changed it, go back to our script. Let's just see what happens. We're going to mess with this. We're changing it to trophy 2 just for fun, right? Save, and let's play the game. Watch what happens. Next code. Look at that. Our sprite changes, right? Our sprite changes because what it's doing is it's pulling the value of that variable in, and that can change dynamically then. So I just replaced the letter A with a trophy. And so then obviously we're going to just go back and we're going to change that back. But that's important to know because then I have sprites for each of the letters of the alphabet here, right? And I have some additional sprites, so you guessed it, right? Number 1, number 21, you know, all of these numbers that calculate the hints that go in between each of these letters, then these are also going to do the same thing where as you enter the room, right? I think that's where I put this code. We're going to figure this out on the fly. As you enter the room, you got to determine what the hints are, right? So I'm doing that in one of these spots. I think I actually, you know what? No, I do it in the player draw event. This is one of those uses of draw event. So title, options, select, start. So here, if you're in the start room on the draw event, we need to dynamically change as you're cycling through the code for the timer, and then we'll have some code for the hint numbers right here. So depending on your X position, you're going to tell the correct little spots where these hints are. So hint down, hint up, that and equals, that controls the little equal signs. Well, let's go back to here. Let's hit play. Right? So this is going to control the greater than, less than, equal sign. That's what that code does. Let's just sit back over here. Oh, did I lose it? Cool. Player. Here's the hint numbers, right? So greater than, less than, equal, right? We're going to do that. And then the number, right? So in this case, I have, like, for example, number 3, 4 is going to go between the letters 3 and 4. So that's 11 here. And that is going to get drawn in that spot when your X and Y position for the player is over here in either of these spots. So super silly way of doing it, but point being is that I'm drawing the correct variable. So I'm updating this variable number 3, 4 based on some little math behind the scenes to figure out that it needs to be variable 11 that then appears there. So that really is the gist of it. You can create all sorts of games using these same principles based on the different custom events, based on passing through data. So for example, you can pass through variables into a custom event like we do for this level code that you'll find in the select screen. When you pass through that and call that event, you can have different things that update for you, and then you can have different variables appear based on that's having the naming principles inherent there, and you can just kind of go from there. And I think, this is a word game, so it's not anything that's too complicated. But I can tell you, just based on some of the other projects I'm working on right now, you can go a lot further beyond that, using those same ideas and using this sort of dynamic principles for updating these variables and using these custom events. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love talking shop with Pulp and Pulpscript. I love Playdate, and I love this community so much. I'm hoping that this is helpful for someone out there, and can't wait to see what other people create with this.